Hello, this is Eric Boroff, the Executive Director of the Cornelius Youth Orchestras, and today I am here with Mr. Tom Burge, member of our brass faculty, works with our brass challenge in the low brass class, and also is the instructor and director for our brass ensemble coming up this fall in the 2024-2025 season. It is so good to sit down with you, Tom. I'm looking forward to learning a little bit more about your background. So for parents and students that are listening, who is Tom Burge? Can you tell us a little bit about what drew you to music, what got you started, and maybe your journey along the way?
Who is Tom Burge? I've been spending a lifetime trying to figure that out myself. So I am I'm an avid musician. I play the trombone. I sing. If there's a musical activity to be taking place, I'd like to be part of it.
Yes.
I don't dance all that well. And I certainly love to teach. I began playing when I was 7 years old, which tends to fly in the face of a lot of the prevailing, I'll call it wisdom, that says you need to be a certain age to start this instrument. 7 was when I wanted to play a musical instrument. So 7 was when I started.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, hey, as it should be.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, your primary instrument is
Trombone.
Trombone. Yeah.
I also play euphonium, which is kind of like a small tuba.
Yeah. Awesome. So 7 years old, started the trombone. I mean, could your arm reach all the way?
Well, no, so the prevailing wisdom is you need to get, the prevailing wisdom from the 1980s in Australia was that only boys could play trombone because it's a brass instrument. Sorry, this is with the disclaimer that I do not believe any of that stuff. And only the tall boys could do it because they needed long arms.
Yeah.
Neither of these things are true.
Right.
I have some of my favorite students and some of my most successful students have been male, female, all walks of life, all different countries. And I guess the other thing is the idea that somebody has to be a specific body type. Comes down to the age-old thought when you see somebody who is small holding a big brass instrument. The idea is, well, wow, you've got to fill that really big instrument with wind. Which is not at all what we're trying to do. We're trying to fill it with vibration. We're trying to fill it with sound.
You're not blowing up a proverbial balloon per se. This is
right. It's just there are big and small megaphones to the same sort of mouthpiece.
And all boils down to that mouthpiece.
And like I say, anybody can do it. And generally speaking, at any age, if you try it at the age of 7, like I did, and it doesn't work for you, but you still want to, come back to it at 9.
Right.
See if this works then.
I love it. So now take us to the next step. So you started at 7 on the trombone. Was this like, I'm sure parents listening, who have had a student start an instrument, maybe have seen some take to it really quickly and find a liking there. Some maybe a little bit slower. What was your journey with that? Was this like your thing?
Yep.
Yeah.
For me, it was. Yeah.
Awesome.
For me, it was. I didn't struggle to be a trombone player. It was a good fit.
That's awesome.
I won't say I started on the trombone. I think my first sounds were on an instrument called the E-flat tenor horn.
Okay.
And that's just because, for whatever reason, I guess the band director looked at me and I wasn't that tall. And I didn't fit the mold of somebody who had long enough arms for a trombone. So back then, they decided, let's put a tenor horn in his hands. And for the first class, I think we had to make 2 notes on a tenor horn on the harmonic series. And we picked those notes out. And I watched a whole lot of people stand up and spend minutes and minutes trying to get eke any sound out.
Right.
And then for me, I'd been waiting all lunchtime, and I got up and made the sounds I needed to make within a nanosecond.
Yeah.
And then sat down again. I was like, there's a bit down there. Oh, happened too quickly. And then the next week, there was this huge, long description of, okay, this week we're going to try and push down different fingers.
Yeah.
Talked about which fingers pertain to, when I say 1, this means this finger. When I say 2, of course, as a kid, I wasn't listening to any of this.
Right.
So I got up there, and I don't even know what fingers I was pushing down, but it became pretty clear this kid is not coordinated enough to play this instrument, which was in my favor. I probably was. I have to say probably the possibilities on the E-flat tenor horn were not going to take my career all that far.
Right.
And I did see a trombone and I thought, that's the instrument that I'm going to be able to make the loudest noise and upset the most people with. That's the one I want to play. And so it spoke to me.
That's awesome. So, and then did you go directly into band class?
Yep.
And what was that like? And then beyond that, into college, what was your story there?
So I never had lessons. We were somewhat told that you could get better if you were able to get lessons. But where I grew up, my side of the tracks was kind of a demographic where not a lot of us had the opportunity to be able to do that.
Sure.
And I certainly didn't. I had an instrument that was borrowed for at least the first 10 years of my playing career. I'll call it a career now. I didn't know it was a career then. But I had the same instrument. Her name was Maggie. I don't know why. That's just what it was. And as long as I played with the community band to whom Maggie belonged, then I got to be able to use this instrument.
Right.
And eventually I outgrew this band and decided, this is maybe 10 years later, I wanted to not do that anymore. Sure. And of course knew that at some point the shoe would drop and I'd have to give up the instrument. Right. And at that point, I don't quite know how my dear old mum did it, but she figured out a way to get the instrument of my dreams, and I had an instrument to continue with at that point. She could see at that point that it was important enough to me to keep going. But I will say I didn't have the experience that a lot of young players have where you're preparing each week for a specific lesson. Yeah. I just prepared for me. Mm-hmm. I knew what I needed to be able to do, and I had my own set of standards. Yeah. And in retrospect, I think that was a really positive thing. Yeah. In terms of time, maybe not, because sometimes weeks would go by and I wouldn't practice. Mm-hmm. And I think any parent out there probably know what that is. But I had this new shiny friend. Yeah. And like any other friend, I wanted to visit it whenever I could. Yeah. Because it was not just a friend, but it was also another channel of my personality that made me different, that made me special. Yeah. So maybe my instrument would not be picked up every day, but when I did pick up the instrument, I really liked it, and that would spark many days of me trying to be good at it, not because somebody was telling me to be good at it, but because I just hungered to learn more about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's incredible. Well, that's the taking a liking to the instrument and having that motivation of coming back to it and just trying to take it to the next level. And I guess there's a component of self-motivation there, which is important. But
also, I kind of prepackaged with that.
Yeah.
You did too, But it's that's an interesting topic in and of itself. Right. It's the whole if your child who's just taken up an instrument, these are the people we're speaking to right now, isn't always chomping at the bit to pick it up. Yeah. Is that a bad thing? I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily. Yeah. As long as there are moments that your kid does hunger to do it. Right. Because I think that prepackaged, this is something that I think is special and that is special to me and that makes me special. Yeah. Should be hopefully enough motivation from time to time to pick it up and do it. Now, if you are going for lessons every week, then that's a different thing. Right. You should be trying to maybe even motivate yourself to do a little bit of work.
Yes. And it can't be understated that the importance of the parental reinforcement and encouragement when it comes to just a reminder to practice here and there, and maybe emphasizing routine and working with the teacher to put that all together. I know
you said a million words just then, but the really interesting one that I heard was practice. The word practice. So I've heard the word practice used by students and parents to describe the stuff we do in the comfort of our own homes to get better. Yeah. I've also heard it used to describe going to your lesson. Right. I've also heard it used to describe going to your rehearsal.
Right.
And I would like to break this myth down right here. Practice is one thing and one thing only. Practice is honing your craft.
Mm-hmm.
It is a self-motivated journey.
Yes.
A teacher might help that motivation.
Right.
But practice is a self-motivated journey. You need to want to practice, and practice is the event that you do to familiarize yourself with your part.
That's right.
Rehearsal is the thing that you go to with Mr. Eric, Cornelius Youth Orchestra, or whatever youth orchestra you happen to be a member of.
Right.
Rehearsal is not where you learn your part. You've already done that when you did your practice.
Right. Yes.
You go to rehearsal to learn everybody else's part and to learn how your part fits in with their part. And the other thing is, what do we have? We have practice, we have rehearsal. If you are lucky enough to have a situation where you have lessons, a lesson is not a rehearsal, and a lesson is not practice. But a lesson is where your teacher can help take that motivation that you've already shown to do your practice at home and help take that to the next level, or help you refine your practice so that you might get to that level a little sooner.
That's right. That's right. The idea of making sure we use the right terminology when we're talking about those things, I think is important too, and it helps understand it in a different way. I think from the student's perspective of putting a different name on the different things that we do on the instrument, I think helps provide a little bit of clarity on what the expectations are and what the responsibilities are of playing an instrument.
Spoken like a true champion of every instrument. Ladies and gentlemen, Eric Borov, my boss.
Oh my.
No, but it's true. It's the idea. Rehearsal and your lesson were born of practice.
Yeah.
Practice needed to lead to both of those things.
Yes.
They shouldn't be things that you enter into having not used the key of practice.
Right. Yes. So clearly practice and all of that is something that you took to heart and pushed your own development on the instrument. Now, I'm sure for those listening, you could probably make an assumption that Mr. Tom here is maybe not from Charlotte, North Carolina. So what brought you, maybe share a little bit about where you're from, but also what brought you to the U.S. and specifically to Charlotte, and what was the journey like there?
I am the only true Southerner in the room, and before everybody gets their fighting jukes up and says, hold on a second, I am from Sydney, Australia. There's not too many places that are more southern than that. What brought me to Charlotte, North Carolina was I had actually been in the United States, lived in the United States prior to this. I call it my previous tour of duty. I'm not a serviceman. I came to the United States to do my master's degree.
Yeah.
And I was up in New York.
Yeah.
And then I stayed for a few more years, and I had various jobs in symphony orchestras in the United States before I was called back to Australia to teach at the Australia, and to eventually be the head of brass at the Australian National University, where I oversaw the program. It was the Canberra School of Music. It became the Australian National University. So my students now, in their own right, are teachers at universities and playing in ensembles around the world. So, I mean, they've done very well.
I didn't know about that. I didn't know that there was a return to Australia.
There was a return to Australia. And then I started realizing with my teaching life, everybody's teaching to performing balance is a little different.
Yeah.
And it only took me about 20 years to figure out mine. But but I toyed with the idea that if I were teaching a lot and performing a little bit, that might be a good balance for me. So I went and I took a full-time position at a university. And as it turned out, for me, I wanted to get back on stage and perform more regularly. And my teaching even became better as a result of it.
Sure.
So I feel like for me, the balance is to be a performer who also teaches. And for other people, it's different, but that worked for me. So I started auditioning for various different positions, and I won this position with the Charlotte Symphony. I'm a trombonist with the Charlotte Symphony. And I won that position in 2005 and took up the post in 2006. I was with the LA Philharmonic for a year after that. That was fun. and the orchestra was nice enough to let me go even before I had tenure.
Wow.
They could see it as an opportunity, so
Sure.
I got to sort of experience a different world of playing. And then I've been back here pretty much ever since. I like to work in various different orchestras in this area.
Yeah.
And in fact, even just this summer, I'll be going up to Grant Park. I'll be playing up in Chicago with the Grant Park Symphony, the Grant Park Festival Orchestra, I think they call themselves.
Yes.
But yeah, I enjoy playing everywhere mostly because of the perspective that it gives me to bring back to my teaching.
Yes, that's fantastic. What a journey. So from Sydney to the States, finish your education, which, by the way, I noticed you didn't mention, but so I will mention on your behalf, your master's was at the Juilliard School, correct?
I've heard of this. Yeah. Wait, so sometimes if you mention that you went to Juilliard, because it is such a well-known school and it's so synonymous with excellence in music teaching and music performance, that if you mention the name of that school, you're presumed to be bragging.
Yes.
So I've actually taken it to heart over the many years where people say, "Oh, well, you went to Juilliard." Then it's like, it's just another music school. That's just the one that I got into.
That's right. Well,
so I've taken it to say I went to a little school in New York, and you can just put together.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
But I was very lucky to get into that school and to have the colleagues that I have still to this day that came from there.
Well, I think the Juilliard School is lucky to have Tom Burge as an alum. I think that's incredible. If you just look at all the different things that you've done, and I've heard you're playing in a variety of
just last night.
Yeah, exactly. There's a fantastic brass recital at Davidson United Methodist, and got to hear that. Heard a piece that was commissioned for you. Correct?
Not necessarily commissioned for me. No, not commissioned for me. In actual fact, that was a super interesting piece of business. You're going to edit all this stuff out, right? I'm just yabbering away like a monkey in a tree. I don't know. So that piece I put on the program was a piece by a not very well-known composer by the name of Carol Martin.
I'm sorry. To clarify, that was a fantastic piece, but I was talking about the piece that Mark Lewis wrote.
Yes, we did have a piece written for us by a very fine North Carolina composer, Mark Lewis. That was a different event, but for sure, yes, indeed.
That performance, I mean, every time I've heard you play, but that performance was really unique and special.
I forget that Eric comes to performances. This is another important. Well, this is another important. If you want to be a live performer, which one hopes all students do right from the moment that they start, one needs to listen to live music as much as you can, and not the recorded stuff. That's great as well, and you should listen to recordings just to sort of better serve you and better build your idea, your concept of sound. But live performance is what we do. We live, breathe, eat, and sleep it. We should be involved in live performance, and I see Eric Boroff at every live performance that I do.
Well, hey, I can't get enough of it.
April as well.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I can't get enough of it. But just taking that whole experience and that body of work, I mean, it's incredible. You're talking just about some fantastic institutions you've had the opportunity to work with and learn under. Now, here in Charlotte, and now we're so lucky to have you working with our kids at the Cornelius Youth Orchestra. I think our kids are incredibly fortunate. They probably don't even understand the breadth of experience and that you bring to the classroom. I think it's just incredible. But I hope that those listening will appreciate that more fully now. But what do you feel like those experiences now through that fantastic journey, what does that help you bring to the classroom? What can students expect learning from Mr. Tom?
It's an interesting lens. Time is a funny thing, isn't it? It sort of changes your perspective on a whole lot of things. So when I was 20, I thought I knew everything. And it wasn't until I was about 24 that I realized when I was 20, I didn't know everything, because now at 24, I knew everything. Then 28, then
yes.
And it's funny, as you get to, when you're in your 20s or your 30s, maybe that little joke is somewhat true. But you get into your 40s, and then I won't even say where we go from there. But you get a little older and you start to realize you don't and won't know everything.
Yeah.
The experience in front of you is going to help shape your knowledge into the future until the next experience in front of you is going to help shape that, and so on and so on. So I guess, how does that help my students? Well, what I've done so far and what I've seen so far, that lens of perspective is a whole lot.
Yeah.
When I was living in Sydney as a student myself, I had a certain small perspective of what maybe my school band program was everything. And the best player in that program shaped my ideal of what was possible on the instrument, until I was able to join a combined schools program, kind of like the all-state band here, where then you would hear the finest players there and be like, okay, now I have a slightly different perspective on what is possible on my instrument, you know. And then fast forward to having been lucky enough to study at a very fine institution in New York City and all the rest of it, my lens has been broadened significantly, and my teachers were the best players on the planet. So I come prepackaged with a sound in my head that I know is possible for everyone, that I would like to share with everyone. Little pieces at a time.
Yes. Well, that's the art of teaching, and I think it's giving students just enough to take the next step in the most informed way. You know, let me paint this picture for you of what you need to do next, and maybe a little bit of why, so that you can understand what to do, which I think speaks well to what we do with our Brass Challenge program. And you work with the low brass classes. It's been fun hearing and being a part of the conversation, and I mean, more so, I think, just listening to the brains in the room talk about how we're going to structure that programming and the educational experience for students. I'm sure there are some listeners that this is a class they're going to be signing up for, so this is going to be a new experience for them. I'm sure it'll be fascinating for them to hear what is the structure of like our Brass Challenge for the listeners that aren't familiar. That moniker is the name we use for our beginning class for any instrument, so any orchestral instrument. So it just means that we don't require any experience on the instrument to get started in that class. So the educational experience, a part of that class, is different than a performing ensemble. And how does that get structured as far as for the students? What is their experience in the beginning classes like that?
It was interesting sitting down with Mr. Alex and Mr. Andrew when we were structuring that idea, because we basically broke down, you could break down any instrument into as many different, the learning of any instrument into as many different important categories or things that you need to know.
Right.
And have an understanding about in order to be able to do. So if I'm to get specific with brass, you could break down brass instruction into breathing and how that pertains to what we do. Sound production, how that pertains to what we do. Articulation, which would be how clearly you can make the front of each note. Different types of articulations, how smoothly, how clearly, how, where we start to get into the way that notes start to emote. Different dynamic contrasts, how we physically get them on the instrument, and then also how they appropriately track for the music in front of you. And so on and so on. Tempo, timing, rhythm, all sorts of different aspects. We essentially broke it down into what we figured were basically 12 basics.
Right.
That we were going to cover in the 12 classes of Brass Challenge each semester.
Yeah.
Some semesters have a few more classes than that, which gives us a little wiggle room.
Yeah.
We were thrilled to find this wiggle room because, of course, once you get in with any group of students, you realize any plan that you make at the beginning is only going to be monitored by the students and what drives them. Some students move at different paces.
Yes.
Some students move with different passions.
Right.
Everybody's different.
Yeah.
And so what I think has informed the Brass Challenge best is, first of all, we had 3 specialists sit down and decide what we want to cover in a semester. And then, unlike, say, a school band program, we have the flexibility relative to the people in front of us, to the very fine ladies and gentlemen in front of us who are our students, to determine what the timeline for that within that spectrum is going to be.
Yeah.
We have my boss, Eric, sitting across the table from me, has been very kind and very flexible, where I've had circumstances where I've seen that maybe certain students will excel a little bit on their own first before we get them back with the group. Yeah. Similarly, some groups we might be able to put this group of students together, this group of students together. It's not necessarily age-based. It's certainly not necessarily experience-based.
Sure.
It can just be based on how you feel like you're going to get the best out of the students in front of it. We have a flexibility with our classes that is so different from a band director who has year 8 in front of them.
Right. And, the curriculum that is,
certain curriculum. We have to get to the Christmas pieces by this date and everything like that. These are nice benchmarks. And of course, we try to keep them in there too because we want the kids to have a fun time. But the most important thing is that they're not that they're being told the right things.
Right.
We know that as teachers, at one point during the whole semester, we're going to be able to tell them all the right things. The more important thing for us is that they're accepting them and learning them and showing us that they understand, that they are understanding the concept of what we're saying. That's when teaching becomes fun for me. And that's why Brass Challenge has been not at all a challenge, but actually quite fun. Which is literally the kids can show, kids that come in not only understand the concepts and aren't just spouting back to you what you've said to them, but they can show you in their own words and in their own ways that they understand the concept of what you're saying, aside from the words that you use to describe. And at that point, they can run with themselves, and they can, here comes that word again, they can practice, but they can practice with informed decisions.
I think it's fascinating to see how that program has come along, and in just a fairly short amount of time too, but how structured it is in the sense, well, I guess not necessarily, structure might not be the right word, but the influence of the different perspective educationally. Our goal is just to help get the kids what they need as they need it, and move that along rather than necessarily following step A, step B, step C. It's like you said, very flexible, and that's our goal with the program. We don't want that to change at all. So we're excited to have the kids that are going to be joining us in the fall participate in that, and then we're so excited to be having you direct the brass ensemble. This fall as well. That's going to be so much fun. I'm looking forward to the kids.
I'm excited too.
Yeah,
it's been a while since I've taken up the baton. I won't use a baton, but my weapon of choice is usually a pencil or just hands.
Yes.
But yeah, if I might toot my own horn, I'm actually quite a good conductor.
Yeah.
And I look forward to getting back in the saddle.
Yeah.
It offers a different perspective, and it's informed my own playing and my own teaching a lot. The years that I spent conducting various different ensembles as well.
So for a student that's in the brass ensemble, these students primarily are more in the upper middle school and the high school age range, and they have
with the group that I'm going to be taking.
Yeah. So for that group, they have a little more experience. Their perspective coming to a rehearsal with Mr. Tom, what is that like for them? Like, what is Mr. Tom strict, or what can students expect?
Be prepared. And when I say be prepared, there is a nature in rehearsal. So your instrument is going to be the one in front of you. Here we go. Your instrument is going to be the one in front of you. My instrument is all of you in front of me.
Yes.
You know that, Mr. Eric. You know that too well. You're the conductor of the Cornelius Youth Orchestra, right?
Yeah.
So, in order for me to train my instrument, I'm going to need to break down each of the elements from time to time into the parts that make it work, so that then we can get them and make them greater than the whole.
Right.
Which means there's going to be times where I'm probably going to ask your section, whoever you are listening right now, I'm going to ask your section to play that little section.
Right.
That's where your practice comes in.
Yes.
I don't want to surprise anyone. I certainly don't want to put anyone on the spot.
Exactly.
But the reason why a lot of ensembles don't play very well together is because that very first thing, that very first element, that practice hasn't taken place. Yes. So with my ensemble, I'm going to insist upon practice of those parts each week.
Fantastic. At home.
Yeah,
rehearsal.
That's right. Practice is not rehearsal. Practice will lead to the rehearsal.
That's awesome. Well, it's important at the beginning stages that we work with musicians. It's fun within the CYO, the programs that we offer. We get to work with them at each stage. But at the beginning stages, everything is all about, just taking those first steps and instilling the primary details of, what all of this means to be a musician and how we can help, students at that level. But then what we do raise the standards higher as students make progress. And so, yes, there is a much higher expectation for students to, if they're going to participate in a higher level ensemble.
What's the easiest way to really enjoy what it is that you're doing? And the answer is to get better at it.
Right, exactly.
Right. The better you get at something, the more it fosters your love of that thing, and the more it flames the hunger that you have to be even better.
Right. And in order to be there, your own standard and the standard imposed upon you we have to raise the bar. And so that's exciting for students to hear that, I'm sure. Well, we can't wait for this fall. It's going to be quite a journey. We're ready for a wild ride. It gets started second week of September. We're looking forward to getting everybody together and rehearsals and classes started. This has been a conversation with Tom Burge on brass faculty here with the Cornelius Youth Orchestras, working with our low brass challenge class, as well as the director of our brass ensemble. Thank you so much for spending time with us today, Tom. For those listening, if you haven't registered already, you can learn more and get your student registered on our website at www.corneliusyouthorchestras.com/auditions. Thank you so much for listening today. We'll see you soon.